Well, that for me is what 2024 looked like. These are all of the models that I painted over the year. There's a couple of extras that technically fell into 2023, but this is what a year's worth of effort looks like to me. Let's jump into the video and take a look at all the individual models that we painted in 2024. Okay, so the first thing that we painted, which was in another video, I believe, can't really remember, was this Dunlending army, which includes guys like Goroth, and to be honest, I can't remember, Thryden, Wolfsbane, everyone's names off the top of my head. These horsemen, a few of these have all been removed-ish from the game. Currently they are unplayable, but I'm intending on using them in an army anyway. This took up a bulk of time this year, putting all these together, because while they're just infantry, I do try and put the detail in. If you look closely, a lot of these guys have their eyes painted and teeth picked out, and I spend probably way too much time. But as it stands, at the time I felt like this was a waste of time. I love painting, but I felt like I was painting towards a goal of being able to play this army. Then they said this army don't really exist anymore, but it'll come back, but who knows what it'll look like. But I've decided I'm going to use it anyway in an upcoming tournament, presuming it will be accepted. Details on that in my other video. A real highlight from this year was painting this Fellowship of the Ring. It was the start of last year, end of 2023 is when it really began. So I can't actually remember which of these models. I think Aragon was technically painted in 2023. But getting this done, which was a goal I had for years and years and years and years and years, and basically since I was a kid, and to such a high standard, or at least in my opinion, such a high standard, was something I was really proud of. And this is, as it stands, an entire playable army. So it ticks 2 boxes in my sort of goals for this year, which is to play more games. And last year it was paint to a really high quality, which I think this does. I think this achieves everything I wanted it to do. I'm very, very proud of it. And I sort of haven't really looked at it since I did it and put the video up. And I mean, it still might be the best painting I've done. It might still, this Legolas, if I remember correctly, it still might be the best model I've ever painted. So, really happy with this when I reflect upon it. Probably need to get it out more and have a look at it. This was the Gimli because I glued this one to the tomb because I didn't like how the tomb looked initially. But the Fellowship of the Ring, could there be a more classic set to paint? I think my focus shifted while I was off screen there. I didn't paint Treebeard. He's an older model I painted years ago. He's the metal Treebeard. But what I did paint were these little hobbits sitting on top. And I did count them as 2 painted models because I painted them to the quality of the Fellowship of the Ring guys that I painted, that I showed off earlier in the video. And again, was just really happy with the faces, and I took the time to do the detail, and all in all, this is something that's not something, if I was ever going to play Ents on the table, you'd go and buy the plastic one and you'd do this again. But for what it is, a display piece, adding to something I painted when I wasn't as good at painting, really, really happy. I'm going to be happy with everything I show, just for the record, basically. All right, the only Star Wars figure we actually painted for the year was C-3PO. Cracked the shits with all the others. He's fine. He was easy, which was the intention, but yeah, I don't know if Star Wars Legion, if the remaining models, unless I get really, really bored, I'm just not sure that that's part of my hobby goals anymore, but the models don't go off, so that's the good news. The next guys I want to show off are just these 2 Lurtz models. You've seen them in another video if you've watched. I was really happy with the basing scheme on these in particular, which is pretty simple, but effective with the autumn leaves. It's not terribly original, but it is something that I hadn't done before. These guys banged out from memory in like a day or two, which I was really happy with. Still have plans at some stage to do a Uruk-hai army. But until that day, these are what we've got to show. Managed to paint an entire Blood Bowl team. And if you recall that video, these were done using a oil wash, which really sort of leaves a matte effect and dulls down the models. They're probably not as brightly colored and interesting as I would have liked, but I do think the effect when they're on the table together is really strong. I will admit I haven't had them on the table that much though, because I just love playing the undead. Got the Chaos Dwarves at some stage that I need to paint. But a project that was done, got the brightly colored skinks, got magnetized bases so everyone can hold the ball really easily. Really happy just to have another playable team. The other benefit of this, while I swallow into the mic and sound disgusting, is that I have 2 painted teams. So I've been able to invite people in, teach them how to play, and they don't even need anything. I provide everything. All they need to do is roll the dice. And that has been one of the real wins of painting up this team of sort of grim-darky Blood Bowl characters. And speaking of Blood Bowl, painted up 2 Forge World star players. This is Wilhelm Chaney, I believe his name is, in the style of my Undead, which is that really bright blue and reddy orangey setup. He was really simple to paint, dry brushing predominantly across the model. Really like how I painted the ball in his mouth, as much as I hate balls being sculpted onto models. And then we've got Frank, I think his name's Frankenstein, just in a big body bloke, lots of battle damage and blood I've put over him, which might have gotten a bit overboard, but that's kind of my team. 333 because he's half evil, which is a throwback to a JJ shirt someone wore on Year 7 camp, which I still remember for some reason. Was very hated while I was painting this guy, but when I was finished, I looked at him and I said, oh, actually, he looks pretty cool. So different skin tones because he's made up of different body parts from different people. And yeah, have even played with him on the tabletop, and he was okay, but probably not worth the in-game currency. Just a small little model here. Painted up an old golem sculpt, put some watery effect on there, which I don't love the solution I have for that, but you can only use what you've got. Glossed up the little fish, which probably doesn't look super realistic, but hey, I'm happy with it. I painted him in, I think, a day. You can see, don't know if it's coming across on camera, but the slightly different pinky scars on his back, the hair threads, I've painted them all in. So the reason I painted him was to add to my now essentially finished Goblin Town list, which he was on my to-do Excel sheet for many, many years, and he's done now. So bloody fantastic. So here we have, which have been in another video, so I won't spend much time on them, but these are the Moria Dwarves. I think that's what they're called, the Khazad-dûm Dwarves. Anyway, there's a bunch of dwarves here that I painted in a bluey scheme. I think this is the only good army other than hero models that I've painted in Middle-earth, and I don't even know if they actually exist anymore, but here they are. This is one of the more simple projects I did this year, but I think it might be the best in terms of results. I also painted it decided to paint it before the new rules came out. We realized that this was going to be a really good army in the new edition. These 4 models, the fire pit included, this is an entire army. So I can take this to a tournament if I wanted to and paint it. Now, we'll go into a bit of detail in this one because I haven't shown it off anywhere. First, the fire pit's just a fire pit, but there is some, you can see my first kind of attempt at OSL on some parts of the model, which I think isn't super obvious. Like, I think it's subtle enough that it kind of, you notice in the back of your head, but not super obvious that it looks bad. And it's not perfect, but I don't think it's bad. And the basing scheme, Used my static grass applicator for the first time, some tufts. That's about all. This is kind of, as part of the storytelling, this doesn't make sense that this fire would still exist, because the story I wanted to tell with this army was that these are the trolls, Bilbo's trolls, after they've turned to stone. Now, the reason I was initially going to try and do them half transforming, but I really struggled to work out how I would do that. And I wanted to try out these weathering pigments, dry pigments. This is the Dirty Down Moss, and I've got some crackling effects on there. I wanted to try and make this look like rock. And so from a storytelling perspective, it doesn't make sense really that their clothes have turned to stone and that their weapons have also turned to stone. But I didn't know how to tell the story because I want to use these as potentially as terrain pieces as well. I didn't know how to tell the story that they've turned to stone and aged, but if I make this rotting clothes and rotting weapons, then I can't really, I'd have to remove the weapons, which would make it hard for gameplay. So the story I've gone with is that the hill troll, anything that they're carrying or wearing, turns to stone, and you can see sort of subtle shades from one direction of brown dust that's built up over them over the years, and then on sort of the, not opposite, but sort of countering that is this Dirty Down Moss. But given it's just dry brushing, washes, and some texture, crackling paste and that sort of stuff, I'm really, 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 really happy with the look. The basing's, rocks and overgrown. I wanted it to be have big enough tufts there that it looks like that they've been there a while, but not have it take over the model. I think if I was going to do it again, you might put some tufts up and down the model, maybe put some vines around him, but ultimately, very happy with how these models turned out. This one of the three is probably my favorite. I think he's just got the depth in the mouth and the eye sockets that really highlights the effect. I also think I'd learned how to do the Dirty Down Moss a bit better. Here you can see on his head there's splotches where I've tried to apply a second layer, which is just not the way I think you need to use this, at least not for the effect I was going for. But the crackling paste texture paste really came across here. It's highlighted with all the dust and moss and stuff, and again, complemented by those big tufts on the base. Subtle as well is that the base, what you can see of the base through the grass, it's the same dirt as the dry browny pigment that is applied here. So there is some storytelling that it's picking up the dust from around the area and being blown onto him. Now I haven't sprayed these guys because I don't want to ruin the effect with varnish or anything. So this pigment powder technically could come off, but it'd be relatively easy to reapply it. And then we'll just look at this final guy just for the sake of it. So I know I spent a lot of time on these guys, but they're not models that I have previously shown off anywhere, but I am happy with them.